I'm Jennifer Bartlett. Welcome to the first staff meeting of the year. We're going to use our time together today in anticipation of our upcoming data team meetings that we'll be having throughout the year. We're going to review some demographic and student achievement data, discuss the observations that we can make as a whole group, and decide where to go from here. So what's the purpose of today's meeting? It's to look at the school's trends, review the milestones and CRCT data, identify strengths and weaknesses, make an action plan, and hopefully influence our data teams in a positive way. Our goal is to improve our data-driven decision making and update our school improvement plan. Remember, we're not going to be blaming students or teachers or getting discouraged by poor performance. We're simply trying to improve the quality of education. So let's start out by looking at the student demographics available from 2016 and 2017. It's easy to see on this pie chart that 78% of our student population is made up of white and Caucasian students. There are 7% Asian students, a little more than 5.5% Black students, 6% are Hispanics, and a little more than 2.5% are multiracial. It's also important to note the educational programs that are currently available at Davis Elementary. There are 12% of students that have been diagnosed with a disability, meaning that 88% of our students are not. Also, we have a very low percentage, simply 6% of English language learners. This information was obtained from the Cobb County School District's dashboard, which is available on the portal. Some of this information was presented to you on the last slide, but there's also some new information worth discussing. Notice that more than 10.5% of our students are economically disadvantaged. That means they qualify for free and reduced lunches. More than 18.5% of our students are gifted. Isn't it interesting that both EIP and remedial services are marked as 0% of our enrollment? Why do you think that is? I assume that since we apply the reduced class size model, that those students aren't noted as EIP. I agree that the remedial requires further investigation. We're going to look at the CRCT data beginning in 2013 and see if we can find areas where our students are deficient. Notice that the orange lines show Davis scores compared to the green lines, which indicate Cobb County scores, and the blue lines, which are Georgia scores. There are 523 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students represented on this graph. Do you notice any strengths? Right away, you can notice that Davis Elementary School's overall performance is higher than schools in the county or in the state. Make sure that when you're looking at this graph, that you're aware that the scores are reported first in reading, then in English language arts, followed by math, science, and social studies. What would you say our weakest area is? I agree that math scores were lower, especially for 3rd grade, but remember this was back in 2013, before it was an emphasis in our school improvement plan. Do you think the extra work we've done on problem solving has made a difference? Is that reflected in the data? This graph shows the CRCT data from 2014. Once again, those orange lines are Davis scores. Do you see that in the 4th grade, reading goes all the way to 100%. That means 100% of our students met the standard. What other strengths do you notice? How about weaknesses in either the areas of reading or English language arts, math, science, or social studies? I agree that most of these scores indicate strengths at Davis Elementary, and they all surpass Cobb County and Georgia scores. The CRCT, the state assessment that we've been discussing on the previous 2 screens, ended in the summer of 2015. So as the new form of summative assessment, schools started using an end-of-year measure known as the milestones. Do you notice any differences? They took out the reading portion and combined that with English language arts. Davis's scores are still shown in orange, while Cobb County's are still in green, and the Georgia scores are in blue. Which 2 subject areas would you say are strengths, and which 2 do you think are deficiencies for some of our students? I agree that the English language arts and math areas seem to show higher amounts of proficiency, while science and social studies, while not poor, could be improved. Here's the most current data that we have available from the milestones given in 2016. Some of these scores are not as high as they are other years, but still the majority of students are proficient, and the Davis scores surpass the county and Georgia scores. Let's look more closely at the reading results from 3rd and 5th graders. Notice on these bar graphs that Davis is pink, Cobb County scores are shown in blue, and Georgia scores are shown in yellow. On the left-hand side shows the level of proficiency. In 2015, 82% of Davis 3rd graders and 83% of Davis 5th graders were scoring at a 75 or higher level of proficiency. That score dropped slightly in 2016 for 3rd graders down to 77.5%, but went up for 5th graders to 87.9%. Let's look at the science and social studies results. They're reported slightly differently. There are 4 quartiles. The bottom quartile, which is pink, denotes beginning learners. The second quartile is blue and indicates developing. The third quartile is the proficient area. And the last quartile is known as distinguished. The first column shows Davis's scores and then compares them in the second column to Cobb County's and finally Georgia's. You can tell that Davis has the majority of their students scoring in the proficient range of science as well as social studies. Do you notice how small the distinguished area is at the top? That might be something worth revisiting as we continue to look at the data. Here are the English and math results presented in the same way. English has a very large percentage of our students scoring in the proficient range and a very small percentage of our students in the beginning range. The same is true for mathematics. So, what are the trends, and how can those help us decide where to go from here? Davis's scores are definitely higher than county or state scores in all areas, for the last 4 years, regardless of whether we look at the CRCT or the milestones testing. 82% or more of Davis's 3rd and 5th graders are reading at or above grade level. In the science section of the Georgia milestones, the greatest percentage of students are in the proficient range. That is also true for the English section of the Georgia milestones and the math section. The only section that the greatest percentage of students are scoring in the developing range is the social studies section. Some discussion should be had among teachers whether or not to make social studies a stronger emphasis in their classrooms, and if so, how to do that. Does another subject need to be addressed? Should our school improvement plan be changed to indicate the need for these changes? Is it more important to move those proficient students into the highest category of distinguished? How can we move more proficient students to the distinguished category? You're going to have a chance to discuss this with your teammates and decide how to address this problem. Should we emphasize social studies? Should we teach in a different way? Do we need more depth and rigor? Should we ask for different materials to teach with? Is it more important to emphasize STEM and utilize the Learning Commons? Do we have other resources available to us, such as the technology coach that could help us improve? Every grade level is going to need to think about these questions, and when we meet for data teams later in the month, decide what we can do to improve the quality of education for our students. It's important to note that I'm not asking anyone to work harder. I think it's important that teachers work smarter, not harder. If we dream big and set goals, the actions that we take can make big changes. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to working with you through this data process as the year continues.